Hello and welcome to another episode of Armored Warfare with your host Czar Peppers. Today I haven't done a sort of tutorial video in a while, so I thought today, now that Armored Warfare is getting into gear and open beta, I would do a video on the different types of ammunition and their various strengths and weaknesses and situations when each is best used. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. So here we are in the T-62, and first we'll take a look at the armor-piercing rounds. First target we have here is, these things are, oh, that was right on the top of the thing. Now there are a number of different kinds of armor-piercing rounds, like Savo and the more traditional ones, but there isn't really much difference other than penetration values and damage done, so I'm not really going to cover them individually. Now, the armor-piercing rounds lose armor penetration the further that they go, so longer range, you're probably best looking at going with heat. The one nice thing about armor-piercing rounds is you can do something like this, shoot through a fence or a soft object and still do damage to the target. The same thing wouldn't be achievable with a heat round. Now you'll probably see with some of these lighter targets that I'm engaging is there are going to be instances when it's overmatch. Essentially what that means is that the AP round is just going right through the vehicle and doing minimal damage. Maybe we'll see that here. Yep, there we go, overmatched. But still 240 damage, so I'm not exactly complaining. Now we're switching to heat. Now if it penetrated, those things I'm shooting at that thing at a high angle at its top armor, so it's probably just glancing off the front. This one will be much more effective, doing 370 damage. However, I'm sort of surprised it did that much damage since I was shooting through a fence, and usually those set off the heat round and it does minimal damage to the target. Now a heat round operates by using a shaped charge to penetrate the vehicle rather than trying to use a projectile to penetrate the vehicle. Now normally in real life heat rounds have pretty good penetration, but in the game they seem to have gone with less penetration and more damage, whereas AP has more penetration but does less damage. So heat rounds are generally great at taking out light targets like APCs and those light tank destroyers that you have in the game. However, against heavier targets like main battle tanks, if you're not aiming at weak spots like the lower glacis or the sides, then you're probably not going to penetrate. Now in this video I'm mainly looking at the rounds in earlier, basically from tier 1 through 4, because I haven't grinded my way up to the higher tiers again yet. But now we're going to take a look at the high explosive rounds in the British Scorpion, a fantastic little light tank. First we're going to be looking at the normal HE round, and as you can see it has very low penetration values. If you do penetrate, it'll do a ton of damage, but even if you don't penetrate, it will do damage, and particularly it'll do lots of damage to the tank's modules. Now, normally you won't have that many HE rounds in your chambers, unless you're in a Scorpion where you only have HE rounds. See, this is what the HE rounds are good against, light targets like this, if I actually hit it. Now here's an example of how HE can be really effectively used. 320 damage right there. But I believe that was a penetrating shot from that much damage. Another light target here, at least from the sides. Well, no, that's actually, those things are pretty decently armored. Now we're going to take a look at the squash. Now the best way to think of a squash round is basically a tank shell filled with a bunch of plastic explosives on a delayed fuse. When you fire the shell and the shell hits the vehicle, the plastic explosive sort of molds to the surface of the tank and then it detonates. This sends metal shards and everything flying around on the tank, which got fired upon, causing a whole bunch of damage. Now in the game, I find the squash rounds have limited effectiveness, although it was pretty effective right there. 178 damage. However, I took out a crewman, which reflects the whole metal flying around inside thing, and did some damage to the modules along the way, which is wonderful. And the British were the main users of squash rounds throughout the Cold War era. Now, as you can see, less effective against the main battle tank, although that wasn't the greatest shot. It can be take a while to get used to the firing arc of HE shells because they're a lot slower and their arc is a lot more pronounced than AP or heat rounds. Now, last but not least, we're going to take a drive in the XM800. First, we're looking at the AP rounds. Effectiveness against a light tank. Now on this thing, on tanks, you definitely have to aim for weak spots, but if you get a good spot where you can penetrate that 72mm, you can do a lot of damage pretty quickly, as you saw with that light tank. Now I find in vehicles like this, you want to make your primary role doing recon, spotting targets, and using your spotting ability on to help your teammates, and then looking for targets of opportunity along the way that you can flank and take out. As you can see, very limited effect with the AP rounds against the frontal and even the side armor of a well-armored tank. But if we get up close, we can do damage to modules, and that damage adds up, especially when you have other teammates shooting at them as well. And that's really how you want to use these things, is in support of your teammates. And by the way, on that last tank, we switched over to the incendiary rounds, which will do little damage to main battle tanks, but they will be pretty effective at damaging modules. Light vehicles, oh boy, they can take out light vehicles quickly, like a knife through butter. Hopefully we'll get to see some of that. Alright, so I'll skip ahead a bit. And see how wonderfully effective it was at taking out that enemy artillery. A bit of a dirt moment. Derp, 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 derp. Yes, yes, I know. You have to drive over there and capture it. A few shots on that light tank. Module damage. Now, I believe the incendiary rounds on these sorts of vehicles have been nerfed from previous early accesses where people thought they were OP. But I find that they're still pretty effective against light targets. It took off most of that health of that Sheridan over there. Let's see if we can peek ahead and finish him off. There we go. You know, there really isn't too much to say about the 20mm autocannon rounds on these things. They're basically brute force. They do small amounts of damage pretty quickly, and they can be very effective at taking out modules. And fantastic for taking out light vehicles, especially those incendiaries. So those are the types of ammunition that you can expect to see between tiers 1 and 4. Now in the future, once I grind a bit more, I just pretty much started grinding to advance in this game again, since the open beta or the preview or the encore, not the encore, what the fuck am I talking about? Stuff happens in this game. Anyways, in the future I do plan on doing some more of these videos on what the hell was that? But I do plan on doing There's just so much going on. But yes, I will be doing more in the future on anti-tank missiles and stuff like the swing fire missiles on the swing fire, and some of the other rounds that you can expect to find in the higher tiers. But until then, because my cat's bugging me to give her some attention, good night.